Well, hello, welcome back to Tale 3 Cabins. Karen and I are still trying to figure out what that critter is that was popping out of our little sewer pipe there. We think it might be a muskrat or a minx. Karen is leaning towards a minx, so it kind of looks like a minx, but didn't get that great a look at it. You can tell me what you think down in the comments. Today I do want to talk about is our shed, and I want to get you up to speed on that. If you have been following our channel for any period of time, you know that I have some issues with our shed and zoning board at our township. And maybe I should just go back a little ways just to catch up on the way things went. If you're thinking about adding an outbuilding to your property or building a little shed or some sort of attachment to your garage or something like that, this video might be a little helpful to you just to see the things that I've gone through here and decide what course you want to take when you're getting ready to add something on your property. So if we go back to 1995, that's when I started building this house, and I pretty much did all the work myself except for the foundation and the plumbing. And the first thing I did was contact the county that I wanted to build a house, and got a surveyor, got a plot plan, and the county was very nice and friendly. They gave me a nice packet that gave me basically a step-by-step process on what to do when building a house. It told me when to schedule inspections, different codes. It was laid out very nice and easy to follow. And that was my only contact with the county, was while building this house. And that was basically about it. So after the house is up, a couple years go by and our garage is starting to get full of stuff. And it's a 2-car garage, but I wanted to park 2 cars, but we can only get 1 car in there. And at that time I was a little strapped for cash, and I decided that we needed to build a shed. I had no problem building my house, and I thought, well, I could put this shed up at my leisure and it'd be the best savings for me. Now, I worked on the fire department. I have a crew, and we're always helping one another out on the fire department. We're doing projects and helping each other. So I decided to build this shed. I didn't think I needed any permits or anything. I knew it wasn't going to be anywhere near my property lines. And the height, I don't think was going to be an issue either. And I was going to be back in the woods. It wasn't going to affect anybody. No one was going to see it. It's not going to affect any neighbors. So at my leisure, I started to work on it. One morning we got off work, and we all had pickup trucks, and we staggered each truck about 10 minutes apart, and we went to this place called U-Cart, where you could pick up a cart of concrete, basically 1 yard in a large vat on a trailer. And I brought it down here and started working on the pad. Once the pad was up, then I could work on the walls at my leisure. Karen and I put the walls together. She helped me raise them. And little by little, the shed went up. It was a great place to put our lawnmower, our rototiller, log splitter, pressure washer. So it quickly filled up with stuff. I had this overhang on the side that I could use to work and keep out of the weather if I wanted to split wood or something like that. And eventually we used that overhang to add chickens to our property. So we had the chickens off of this overhang here. We had a little run area in front of the shed. And that sufficed us for quite a few years. And then once we had all this stuff in the shed, we decided we're going to place a garden on the side of our property as we come down the driveway. And the garden shed was in a perfect spot for the gardening tools. The garden did well for a couple of years, but then it started to dwindle as some of the trees started growing by it. And the areas of the garden got less sun and more shade, that we decided that we were going to have to eventually move the garden. Now JD comes into the picture, and we purchased JD in 2018. We purchased a box blade and a brush hog with it, and we were able to squeeze it in the shed, and it was tight. I had to retract the bucket as far as I could and pull the backhoe off to the side and bring down the ROPS, but it fit into the shed and I kept it out of the weather, and the implements could fit under the little overhang that we had, as long as the chicken coop wasn't there. So we decided to move the chicken coop over to where the old garden was and let them use that old garden as a run. And then we had to put a new garden in front of the shed. We also added a little above the ground cistern so we could water it and gather rainwater off the roof of the shed. And things were working out well for us. But now I got to blame this part on my neighbor. Of course, my neighbor has a tractor. Of course, now I have a tractor. My neighbor has a little water oasis in their front yard, and we put a water oasis in our front yard. My neighbor started building a pole barn, and then that kind of put the idea in my head that maybe we needed to build a pole barn because JD was starting to accumulate implements. We added a snow plow, we added a brush crusher, we added a rototiller, we added a tooth bar, we added a post hole digger, carryall. And now it looked like a pole barn was probably the way to go for JD and all the implements. My neighbor being just starting to build his pole barn, I went to him and I just kind of asked him, what was the procedure for it? And he said, well, he went through the township. He had to get a variance because of the height of his pole barn. So that was what set me off to call our township and just ask them. I was building a pole barn. It wasn't going over 15 feet, but the cupola was going to be taller than 15 feet. And does that affect the overall height of the pole barn? And I'm talking to this person on the phone, and she says, I don't really know offhand, but where do you plan on building this pole barn? And she must have been looking at a plot of our property. And I said, well, it's going to be about 200 feet in front of our house, which is going to be about 550 feet from the road, well within our property boundaries. The township zoning told me that you're not allowed to build anything in front of your house. You could try to get a variance to see if they'll allow you to build something, but there's no guarantees. So this is in October of 2020, and I applied for the variance. In February of 2021, I had my meeting in front of the zoning board. I gave them nice schematics. I gave them a nice plot plan of our property. I had pictures, overhead pictures I took with the drone, exactly where it was going to be, that it wasn't going to interfere with anybody. I thought I had it all laid out. I gave a little presentation. I gave the history of the property. Why are we built back so far? This meeting went down this rabbit hole. It started talking about the length of my driveway, how far back it is. What about fire protection? What if you have a fire at your house? There's a little bridge that goes over the creek. They started talking about that. They said, can a fire truck go over this bridge? Then they brought up this shed, which is on the tax map, and I've been paying taxes on it for 20 years. But they call it a garage. And they said, well, why do you want to build a pole barn there when you already have a garage in front of your house? And I said, well, it's not a garage. It's more of a garden shed. You wouldn't be able to put a car in it, and it's just a shed that I built a while back. It's been there for years. One of the zoning board members said, well, you're paying taxes on a garage, but it's not a garage. It's just like a large garden shed. So at this meeting, they eventually did approve me to build a pole barn. I spoke with the fire department there because there were fire department officials there, and I said, look, if you want to check out our driveway, you're more than welcome, because I know if you want to put it in your CAD system, so if dispatch is going to call you out, that they can make notes and give you a heads up that it's a long driveway, that the truck can go over the bridge or it can't go over the bridge. So they came out a couple weeks later and looked at the bridge and basically said, oh, I don't think I would drive over it. And I really thought that that was the end of it. I had to wait a month after the approval that they voted on to make sure that no neighbors were going to contest the decision, and none did. So I began a little process to start building the pole barn, just clearing out the area and prepping the site. So once I do get a builder in here to help me build it, that we'd be ready to roll. I contacted the county online to get a permit, and they said, well, you need the certificate from the zoning board. I said, well, here's a copy of the letter, or the approval letter, and they said, no, it's got to be a certificate. So then I end up calling the zoning board to get the certificate. When I called them, they said, oh, we've been trying to get a hold of you. We're not going to give you that certificate until you get a variance for this shed or you tear it down. And I said, well, that's news to me. I said, well, we sent this out about a month ago and we haven't heard back. They ended up sending it to the wrong address and it got sent back to them, so they should have known that I was not aware of all this stuff that was happening. So anyways, they wanted me to get a variance for this shed. So now we're into May. I get a variance meeting for the shed, pay another $500 for the application fee, and I go before the zoning board in June. They basically shot it down, voted no 3-2, and they were not going to give me my other permit until I tore this shed down. So I ended up getting an attorney, and the attorney said, well, these are two separate issues. Let's get you your permit first. And they sent out a letter, and within days I had the permit that I could start working on the pole barn. The next thing we did with the attorney was we appealed the decision on this shed to tear it down, and that means it goes to a magistrate and they review the materials and then decide whether or not to agree on the township's favor or my favor. The bad thing is it's not like there's witnesses called or there's like any hearings or there's a courtroom. It's all done with paperwork and filing briefs. And you really can't introduce any new information. You just have to introduce what was said at the meetings. There's very little that you can do. So a lot of times you really can't reverse those decisions. A lot of times the county is not going to reverse it because they don't want to have bad blood with the townships. It was going to be a difficult situation, but we appealed it. We found out that this ordinance about building in front of your house was not accepted until 2007, and that this was built in 2002, and that I had pictures with metadata on it saying the exact date of when this was constructed. So we were able to get some of that entered into the paperwork. But the process went back and forth and back and forth. And basically in late February, we got a notice that they had made a decision that we would know in a few days. Early March, we got their decision, and they pretty much went against us and went in favor of the township, which we kind of knew was going to happen, but that was our plan A. So right now we're at the point where we're either going to have to tear it down, try to move it, try to do that, but it's going to take a lot of major surgery to cut off these ends, get it on a trailer, and move it to our backyard. So that kind of brings you up to speed to right now. Right now we are working on Plan B. In Plan B, we should know something. As I'm recording this right now, we should know something tomorrow. Someone's going to come out here and take a look at our Plan B and see exactly and see if this is going to fly or not. So I'm disappointed that this failed, and I kind of think the one reason that they went against it is because they thought that if I have this pole barn, they didn't think I needed a shed, even though I did try to explain to them that I did not want to move everything from the shed into that pole barn, because then I'd be right back where I started from. I'd have to maybe moving 2 or 3 items out of the way to get to an item that I needed. And I just didn't want that. I wanted to have it nice and open in there so I can get to everything easily without moving things around. And then if I wanted to work on something, I could pull my truck in there, bring my UTV from down to Southern Ohio, and just have the room to stay comfortable in there. And the other thing that I think they might have been thinking is that maybe I could move this to the backyard or put a shed in the backyard. And to me, that's not an option, because our septic system is back there. We have a lot of old growth trees back there that would have to come down. And it stays wet pretty much all year round back there. A lot of times I can't cut the backyard certain times of the year because it's still too wet, even though the front yard is nice and dry. Every time I'd pull the lawnmower out, I'd be creating ruts. So there's a lot of logistics to it. And when you get right down to it, I guess if someone were to actually come out here and visually look at things and understand what we're talking about, they would see that this shed does not affect anybody. No one can see it from their homes out by the street, and neighbors can't see it. Nobody can see it over there. And it's basically in the best location for us, and it serves its best purpose where it's at. It serves as our garden shed, and it serves as a rain collector. We also have solar panels on it because it gets the most sun over here now. I think if you put eyeballs on it, you'd understand why it's here and what its purpose is, but you probably can't explain all that in paperwork, in paragraphs, and even in pictures. And basically, as I record this, I'll know tomorrow about Plan B, because someone's coming out from the township to take some pictures, and we'll see what happens. So I thought I would just bring you up to speed on all this, let you know where we're sitting, and then next week I'll let you know if Plan B worked or not. I'll know much more tomorrow. I appreciate everybody watching. I hope you enjoy these videos and subscribe, and keep an eye on us. Take care. When I was younger and driving through the country, I used to love to see the mail pouch barns. It just kind of brings back a little bit of nostalgia, and that's one of the reasons we put the mail pouch on the side here. Just a little side note, I don't use tobacco products or anything like that, but it's just a throwback to driving through the country and seeing those barns. And I collect some of the pictures, and I have some figurines that kind of go with it. We thought it'd be kind of neat to put this on the side. And one nice thing is, as it weathers, it looks more and more natural.